Well, good morning. My name is Mark. I'm on the team here at GatheringPoint, and I have a confession to make right off the bat. I like sleep. And I don't want to brag, but I'm pretty good at it as well. I had a roommate in college, and he wanted to be good at sleep, but he was not. And he would go to bed early, and he would just lay there, and he would stare at the ceiling. And one day, I was sitting in our living room in our apartment on campus, and he must have been sleep deprived, because he came down, and he looked at me, and he said, "You make me so angry." And I'm like, what did I do? And he said, "Every night, I go to bed, and I lay, and I stare at the ceiling for 2-3 hours, just hoping I'll fall asleep. You walk in, and as soon as your head hits the pillow, you're out." So, like I said, I don't want to brag, but I'm pretty good at sleeping, and other people notice. As a matter of fact, I would say I've even kind of perfected it to an extent over the last 20 years, as I've been a father now for 20 years, because I can watch TV with my eyes closed. My wife and kids would say that I'm sleeping, but you know what it is, right? Just resting my eyes, right? I mean, you know what it is. If someone changes the channel, they try to change the channel, I know exactly what's going on. I know exactly what was happening in the game. And hey, what are you doing? What are you doing here, right? I mean, we know what's going on. Maybe some of you have perfected that technique as well, but if you haven't, don't worry, you'll get there. It takes years and years of practice. But sleep, it's one of those things that I think all of us would say is super important, but we would all probably say we don't get as much as we would like to do as well. And when we don't get enough sleep, we have trouble focusing. We have trouble concentrating. Those closest to us might even say we get a little bit cranky when we don't have enough sleep, because our bodies were designed to need rest in order to function properly. But sleep is only part of the rest that we need. There's so much more. And as Matt shared, over the next several weeks, we're going to be exploring this idea of what it means to have real renewal in our lives and how we can develop rhythms that help us get there and stay consistent with it. So we'll be talking about restoring and connecting and creating. And this week, we're going to focus on rest. Because the truth is, we all need rest, but very few of us actually rest. So what are we supposed to do? Well, I always think it's a good thing to start and take a look by what God has to say on the subject. We believe that God is the designer and creator of our bodies, and so he may know a thing or two about the inner workings of these human bodies. And so some of us may find this hard to believe, maybe find it hard to admit, but we were not created to move and go on a non-stop pace. As a matter of fact, we were designed in God's own image, and God himself even rested. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 2, we read this: "By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing, and so on the seventh day, he rested from all of the work." Now, most of us have probably heard that verse somewhere along the line, but I think it's the next verse, verse 3, that really kind of brings it all together and ties it together as it goes on and says, "And God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done." God rested, and on that day he made it holy, and he gave us an example to follow. And if we examine that verse a little bit closer, what we find is this: that rest precedes blessing. We don't always have to be doing something and on the go to earn rest. We are fueled by rest. Rest is what gives us the energy to go in the first place. Now, I don't think that it's a secret that the world in which we live in is overstressed, it's over anxious. Many of us are burned out, and none of us like feeling that way. But if we were honest, we probably would all go, "Yeah, that's me. I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm burned out on things." So what do we do about it? What's the remedy? Rest. So today we're going to take a look at some things that cause us to rest less, and some rhythms that can protect and give us life. And so to start off, we should probably take a little bit of a self-inventory. Like, how are you doing, really? Like, really, for a moment, give yourself permission to ask that question and to be honest with yourself. How am I doing really? Because I think that most of us are able to walk in here on a Sunday morning or various other places throughout the week, and we can put a smile on our face, and we can nod at people. Hey, how you doing? I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. And we can kind of pretend and put on this front and make everybody believe that things are perfect in our lives. But we know deep down inside what the truth is, that things aren't always perfect. As a matter of fact, most of us would say very seldom are they ever perfect. One of the biggest causes of restlessness in our lives is anxiety. And much of our anxiety comes from uncertainty about the future. We toss and turn at night, obsessing over things that we have no control over. So what are some things that cause us to lose rest and add to our anxiety? Well, maybe the first place that we should look are the things that are probably all sitting in our back pocket or our purse or wherever, our phones, our devices, our screens, the technology. We live in a world that is becoming more and more dependent on technology that fits in our back pocket, right? And that technology is we're continually being nudged towards a set of choices. The question that we have to ask ourselves are those choices leading us to a life that we actually desire? I remember somewhere around 2008 when I first got on Facebook. And I remember it being like, it was just amazing, right? I was connecting with people. I was connecting with friends that I hadn't seen since high school and college. And it was a way for me to connect with new people. I could see what was going on in other people's lives. I could share what was going on with mine. And it was just this awesome way to stay connected. And then the like button. I mean, come on. The like button, like how else would people know that I liked a picture that they had posted or whatever paragraph post that they decided to share that day? And then the like button kind of became a monster all by itself. It produced what researchers call a feel-good chemical called a dopamine hit. And if you're not sure what that is, let me share with you what dopamine is. It's that feel-good chemical that gets released, and it's our inner reward system, right? And so that could be a good thing. It keeps us wanting more. It could be a good thing, like in moderation. I love the smell of fresh-baked cookies. I mean, it makes me feel good. I want more of that. It can also be a bad thing, right? Addictive drugs can also release a dopamine hit. Even though they're bad for us, people who have gotten sucked into addictive drugs know that I know it's bad for me, but that feel-good chemical just kind of keeps me wanting more. So it can be good or bad. And researchers have found that social media mimics connection, and it prompts a dopamine hit when we get likes and comments. And when we become too connected to social media, well, we can turn into crazy people. Watch this.
Oh, wow, your ring is getting loose there, Deb. Are you losing weight?
Yeah, I am. You know what I've been doing? Spinning. Yeah, it's a great stress reliever.
Now, I'm going to tell you what's an even greater stress reliever, and that is a week in Paris.
Oh my gosh, I saw that on Instagram. All your pictures were so great.
Oh, so you did see him?
Yeah.
Well, that's funny, because I was going to ask how come you didn't like any of them.
What do you mean? I just said I did.
Well, no, all my other friends who saw my Paris pics, they clicked like. You were the only one who didn't click like.
Oh, I guess I just didn't get around to actually clicking like on them.
Okay, because look at this one. Now, in this one, we have Sheila and Gary wearing berets. Right, bonjour.
I like that one so much. It's
but
so
you
cute.
didn't like it.
Okay.
Now, here are the four of us at the Arc de Triomphe. Didn't like that. Didn't like my children. Didn't like my man kissing on me.
I promise you, the second you guys leave, I am going to go upstairs online and I'm going to click like on every single one of them.
Honestly, honey, it really,
promise.
it makes no difference to me.
Okay, so maybe you've never done that. Maybe you have. I don't know. But there is some truth there. We get likes. We get comments. we want more. And so we post more, and we scroll more. And we might even find ourselves starting to compare our lives to the filtered lives that we see online, the filtered pictures and the highlight reels that people will post online. Which many times when we do that, it leads us to feelings of inadequacy, of anxiety, maybe even depression. And we're in a state like that, we are unable to rest. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that social media is bad, but I do think that it is wise for us from time to time to examine our lives, and maybe we need to examine social media and make sure that we have control over our social media and make sure that social media doesn't have control over us. And it's not just social media, right? It's our technology in general. Our technology has so much power. We don't have to leave our jobs at the office anymore, do we? I mean, we are able to be connected at anywhere, at any time, because we have email on our phone, we have text on our phone, we have ways to message people through different apps. I mean, can we ever rest when we're that connected? For many of us, we race through life full throttle, right? Pedal to the metal. And we are just going from photo to photo, from achievement to achievement, from issue to issue, and we never even stop to ask why. Maybe taking a break from social media, technology, maybe that would help slow us down just a little bit. Because taking a break allows us space to examine our blind spots. It gives us greater capacity to live in the moment that is right in front of us. And if you find yourself anxiously comparing, constantly distracted, envious maybe of what other people post online, then maybe you would consider the words of the Apostle Paul as he shares with the Galatian church, and he says this: "For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ." If we find ourselves falling into the comparison trap, maybe we need to ask the same thing that Paul asked. Am I trying to please man, or am I trying to please God? And maybe taking a break from our technology and our social media for a little while might be a wise choice. Because if you're feeling stressed and anxious, maybe you give it a try. Give yourself a chance to rest your soul, your body, your mind, and not just for your sake, but for the sake of those closest around you as well. Another thing that may be causing us not to have rest is that we don't do a very good job of creating margin for quiet time in our lives. Now, I've always considered myself more of an introvert than an extrovert, which may surprise some of you because I do like being around people. But did you know that there is actually another personality type that is a balance between extrovert and introvert called an ambivert? And I feel like that might describe me a little bit better, and maybe some of you as well, because I like being around people, but I need a break after a while as well. And so regardless of whether you feel you're an introvert, an extrovert, an ambivert, we all need quiet time in our life. Time to pause, time to reflect, time to rest. And this is a truth that Jesus modeled for us throughout his ministry. And maybe you've heard this story before, but Satan comes to Jesus and he tempts him 3 different times in 3 different ways to try to get Jesus to do something that he wants him to do. And the first time that Satan comes to him, he tries to tempt him in a physical manner. And he says this, he says, "If you're the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." And Jesus answered, "It is written, man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." And then Satan tries to tempt Jesus in an emotional way. He says, "Hey, you say you're the Son of God, but does God really love you?" And he goes on, he says, "The devil took him to the holy city, had him stand on the highest point of the temple, and he said, 'If you're the Son of God,' he said, 'throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone.' And Jesus answered him, 'It is also written, do not put the Lord your God to the test.'" And then finally, Satan tempts him with power, because who can resist power, right? And again, the devil took him up to a very high mountain. He showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. All of this I will give to you, he said, if you will bow down and worship me. And Jesus said, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And then the devil left him, and the angels came, and they attended to him. Now, we hear a story like that, we may be tempted to think, well, he's Jesus. Of course he was able to resist temptation. And by the way, what does that story have to do about rest? That seems stressful and makes me anxious just thinking about it, right? Well, before any of this happens, do you know what Jesus was doing? Do you remember what Jesus was doing? He had spent 40 days in the wilderness by himself, fasting, praying, resting, growing in his relationship with his heavenly Father. And because he had spent time in the quiet, just him and God, Jesus was then able to resist the temptations that Satan was putting before him. Many of the miracles that we read that Jesus performed, after he performed them, he would often retreat to a place of solitude and rest. On the night before his crucifixion, what does Jesus do? He goes to the garden to pray and prepare for what is about to happen. And making time for quiet was part of his routine. And if Jesus needed quiet in his life, how much more do you and I need quiet in our lives? Because we need to come to an understanding that we are the best version of ourselves when we are in a centered place of rest and quiet. However, being still and finding quiet isn't always easy. Our culture fights for our attention like none other, doesn't it? The noise and distractions that we see and we face are endless. And even if we can get rid of the distractions and make space for the quiet, we still have to be comfortable enough being alone with ourselves and our thoughts in the quiet. Because being alone with our thoughts and our failures and our hopes and our dreams, like sometimes that can be an overwhelming, scary place to be as well. But once we get comfortable in the quiet, incredible things can happen in our lives. Because in the quiet, we gain perspective. See, when there's noise in our life and the noise overwhelms our lives, it is easy for us to lose track of reality. But we gain perspective in the quiet. And when we take time for the quiet, we can see more clearly and we gain the energy that we need to face the challenges that are happening in life. It's like a reset button for us. It's like my computer, which may be a really bad analogy for today, but it's like my computer when it starts running slowly or it just seems like it's bogged down. I've been told, just turn it off, let it reset. And when I do that, it clears all the clutter and it allows it to start working the way that it was supposed to work in the first place. And we do the same thing when we allow ourselves to be still and be quiet and reset. A recent article in Forbes magazine said this: studies show the ability to tolerate alone time has been linked to increased happiness, better life satisfaction, and improved stress management. The phrase there, ability to tolerate alone time, seems odd, but at the same time, it drives home a point of how much we have to fight for quiet. Just the ability to tolerate alone time. Many mornings, I like to go out for a run to exercise, but also just to be quiet. I like to go to Perry Farm or Davis Creek because it's just me and the trees and every now and then a squirrel and a deer around the path. And it's serene and it's quiet and I love those moments. But even in those times when I'm running and I'm out there by myself, I have to remind myself to slow down, to be still, because it's easy for me when I'm out there on the trail to allow my mind to start going to my mental checklist and all the things that I need to do today and the things I didn't get done yesterday. Or maybe I'm looking at my watch because I want to know what my time is and how fast am I going because I'm too competitive sometimes. A few weeks ago, I was on a trail. I was running, and I rounded a bend, and I could see ahead of me just a little way, and I saw two people walking, two people that I greatly admire and respect. And there was something inside of me that said, hey, you should stop and walk with them for a few moments, which is totally unlike me when I'm running, because when I run, I just want to go, and I want to do it, and I want to be done, right? But I got up to them, and I listened to that nudging, and what ended up only costing me an extra 5 minutes when I looked at my watch when I was done, ended up being the rest that I needed that day. As we walked, both of these people spoke words of encouragement to me in that short time that we were together. And I don't even know that they realized that they were breathing life into me, because that's just who they are. But I needed to slow down. I needed to listen. I needed to be still in those moments as they poured into me, and I needed it more than what I realized. And I believe that God provides us with moments like that all the time. If we'll just keep our eyes open, if we'll listen to those nudgings, and we'll be blessed for it. Of course, when we talk about rest, we need to talk about sleep as well. Our bodies were designed to need physical rest. And some of us have a really hard time turning our minds off at night, don't we? And I know that some of you are night owls and you do your best work at night, and that's fine, but we still need to understand that we have to allow our bodies time to recover and adequately rest. I told you earlier I'm a pretty good sleeper, and my wife likes to tell a story when we lived in Ohio of when our house got struck by lightning and I slept right through it. Apparently it sounded like a bomb had went off in our house. Our washer and dryer blew up, outlet covers blown off the wall, and I didn't hear a thing. I'm telling you, it's a gift. I don't know what else to say, right? But as deep of a sleeper as I am, there are still times, there are moments when I go to bed at night and I can't turn my mind off because I'm thinking about something that was said earlier in the day, or I'm thinking about something that I didn't get done, or a situation that I wish I would have handled differently. But we need to learn how to turn our minds off, because most of it's stuff that we can't control anyway, right? It's gonna be there in the morning, I just get a rest, and then I'll probably be able to handle it a lot better, because without sleep, we can't function properly. We miss things, and that adds to more stress, and that can be a vicious cycle. The more we have to do, the less sleep we get. The less sleep we get, the less productive we are. The less productive we are, the more helpless we feel. And the more helpless we feel, the more feelings of stress and anxiety weigh on our shoulders. And that hurts us, but it hurts those around us as well, because we take it out on them a lot of times, don't we? In the book Sleep Revolution, the author says this: when you find depression, even when you find anxiety, when you scratch the surface, 80 to 90% of the time, you find a sleep problem. And the author goes on and says this isn't just a problem for adults, but it's for our kids as well, and maybe for us also. But TV, television, video games, smartphones, tablets, all have been recently identified as agents that frequently disrupt a child's sleep, including leading to total sleep deprivation. Sleep is critical for our emotional and our mental health. And so we need to make it a priority to sleep if we want to experience real rest in our lives. Finally, if we truly want to experience rest, we need to take a look at Sabbath rest. The word Sabbath comes from the Hebrew word Shabbat. It was the day that God commanded the Jewish people to rest. The Jews were to stop working from Friday sundown till Saturday sunset. It was to be a day of rest. It was a reminder that God himself rested after 6 days of creation. But sometimes we see rest as a sign of weakness, don't we? I mean, we hear people say it all the time, right? I'll sleep when I'm dead. Right? It's a sign of weakness. And that's what our culture tells us. If I work just a little bit harder, if I practice just a little bit more, if I connect with the right people, then maybe I'll live a life of significance. But God tells us something just the opposite. He declares that we are already chosen. He declares that we are already beloved, that we are set apart, and he gives our life purpose. And we don't need to prove anything to anyone that God already says is true. Your value as a human being is not found in what you produce, but in who you are in Jesus. And from the very beginning, God designed his creation to be more abundant, fulfilled, and joyful when working from a place of rest and renewal. But even if you're not sure you buy into all this God stuff, maybe you came this morning with a friend and like, I'm not even sure that I believe God's even real. I'm not sure yet. Well, even if that's you, science actually backs up this claim as well. For example, wise farmers will tell you that they need to give their fields a rest every few years in order to restore the nutrients into the soil. That when they allow a field to rest for 1 year, the following 6 years produce abundantly more than if they had tried to push through that 7th year. Soil ecologists even say that those farmers who don't practice rest for their fields, that their fields will stop producing crops within 1 to 2 generations. Rest is essential. And we have to be intentional about resting. And when we're intentional about the Sabbath, about resting, even though we have so much to do, we create space for healing, for wholeness, and for being renewed. It's a truth that got built into the living design, into the design of all living things. Now, when many of us hear the word Sabbath, a lot of us go back to our Sunday school days and, that's just one of the 10 commandments, keep the Sabbath holy, but it is not just a law for us to keep track of one more thing that burdens us. That's not it at all. It is a gift that God gives to us because God knows it will make our lives better and it will make us better at life. Our lives will be more productive, more joyful, less stressed, and less filled with anxiety when we follow his plan. As we close, I want you to listen to the words from the Apostle Paul, who was writing to the church in Philippi, who was facing hardships, they were facing persecution, they were facing dangers of all sorts, things that would just bring you and I anxiety and stress for sure. And Paul writes to them and he says this, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds in Christ Jesus. When we rest and we rest in Jesus, God will give us a peace that transcends our understanding. It doesn't make sense. I should be stressed, but I have peace. But in order for that to happen, we must be intentional about making rest a priority in our lives. I've told you all throughout today, I'm pretty good at sleeping. I'm not always very good at resting. Because rest is more than just getting enough sleep, although that's important and that's part of it. But it is learning to trust Jesus with our future. Even though we don't know what the future holds, we trust the one who does. And when we do that, the Apostle Paul says that the peace that surpasses all understanding will guard our hearts and our minds in Jesus. So maybe this morning it's time for you to surrender. Whatever it is that you're worried about, whatever it is that you really don't have control over, that you're stressing about, that is filling your life with anxiety, and take up his offer to find rest in him. This morning, the band's going to play, and you'll have an opportunity to respond. And at the stations that we have places where maybe you want to write out a confession to God, to your Heavenly Father, that you haven't taken rest seriously, that you're just tired and you need to rest. Maybe you want to ask God and invite him to help you find places of rest and that you can rest in him. And we would be honored to pray with you throughout this week. Maybe you want to light a candle as a symbolic act to ask God to shine a light in the areas of your life where you need rest. And maybe that's rest from social media. Maybe that's making sleep a priority. Maybe it's taking a break from things that is consuming too much of your time. Or maybe today you want to grab the elements for communion as a way to thank Jesus that we don't have to live up to anyone else's expectations, even our own sometimes, because of what he's already done for us. And invite him to give you rest. Would you pray with me, and then you can respond as the band plays. Jesus, God, we're so thankful that you invite us to rest. God, it's not something that we have to keep track of. It's not another thing to burden us, but it is a gift that you give us. That we work, that you designed us to function in a place of rest and renewal, and you don't want us to be stressed. And sometimes, God, we've bought into this lie that if I just go harder, if I go longer, if I go faster, that I'll be successful. And your word says that we don't have to do that we can find rest in you. And so today, as we probably all would admit, that we're stressed and we're anxious and we're burdened, God, would we lay it at your feet and say, I'm done. I want to rest in you. May it be so today, Jesus. We love you, and we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us today online. If you enjoyed the content you saw today, we really think you might like being here in person with us at Gathering Point. And we have environments on Sunday for your elementary students, your preschoolers, and our nursery is open as well. So you can get all the information about joining us here in person at our website, gatheringpoint.church. We can't wait to see you soon.